So welcome to our latest online artist talk presented by the Maloof. I'm your host, Seth Pringle. I'm program manager at the Salmon Alfreda Maloof Foundation for Arts and Crafts. Today, I'm very excited to be welcoming Jom Rivers, Lauren Verdugo, and Larry White to present on their projects that are currently on view in our gallery as part of the exhibition Artists' Hands. So they'll each be giving a slideshow of their work, and then we're going to have some conversation, questions and answers after their presentations. So thank you all so much for making a donation to join the talk in whatever amount you chose. Every little bit helps out these days. We're still living in the land of limited capacity, which makes it hard to bring in those earned revenues. So the philanthropic generosity is incredibly important right now. So thank you very much for making those donations. So before we get started, I'm going to start out with our native land acknowledgement. The Salmon Alfreda Maloof Foundation for Arts and Crafts acknowledge the Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of Tovangar, or the Tongva world. This area includes the Los Angeles Basin, South Channel Islands, San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys, and portions of Orange, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work for the Taraxatom, or indigenous peoples in this place. As an institution located on unceded indigenous land, we pay our respects to Hanukvitam ancestors, Ahihirom elders, and Ivuhinkem, our relatives, relations of past, present, and emerging. All right, so like I mentioned, we'll have the slideshows, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. You all are welcome to type your questions into the chat at any time during the talk, and then we'll try to get to all of them at the end if we can. So yeah, feel free to type those in at any time. And as I mentioned, the projects that our presenters are going to be discussing are from the current exhibition in the Jacobs Center gallery called Artists' Hands. They're all three projects were supported by funds from the California Arts Council through grants. So we thank the California Arts Council for supporting these projects. And the gallery is open on Saturdays during our public hours are 10 to 4. And the gallery and gardens are free. You don't have to have a reservation or a ticket or anything. Come on and check out the projects in person, as well as the rest of the exhibition, which includes many pieces from the Maloof permanent collection that aren't often on view to the public, as well as works by several other contemporary artists who work with the Maloof and have relationships with the Maloof. Okay, so our first presenter today will be Jom Rivers. Jom is an LA-based artist and mixed media sculptor. He studied at Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, where he studied industrial design, transportation design, film, and fine art. He was a Maloof fellow, our first fellow in 2018, and he is currently running a studio in Monrovia, creating custom furniture and wood products from recycled or reclaimed wood. All right, I'll hand it over to you, Jom.
Hello, everyone. You guys are having a good day. Let me start my slideshow. All right, is that visible?
Looks good.
Okay, so like Seth was saying, I am a mixed media sculptor. That's how I refer to myself. I use a lot of different materials. I've gravitated to wood lately, but I originally did a lot of ceramics and whatever I could find. This project I did at the Maloof is this is the original Gourd instrument. It was an idea that came from college where I wanted to create an instrument made from locally sourced materials the way my ancestors would have created an instrument. So I wanted to get everything I could from near me, LA County. And I ended up discovering the Wilburn Gourd Farm, which is the largest gourd farm in the country. So all the instruments I was making, the resonator box is a gourd and the rest is woodworking. This is, if you guys have had a chance to see the show at the Maloof, there's a little video. This is Laura Cooper and we're at my senior show at Art Center. So this is one of my pieces, mixed media sculpture, metalwork. And after Art Center, I ended up at the Maloof through some of my film friends doing a little documentary video. And then I met Dennis Hayes, who's done a lot of workshops. So this is me and Dennis at a workshop. And yeah, that's pretty much how I got to the Maloof. When I got the opportunity to do the grant project, I wanted to revisit the project I started at Art Center of making the very nice guitar out of locally salvaged materials, because the ones I started with, they weren't very, they didn't work very well. I ended up taking another course to learn how to do, how to make a good quality instrument. But this is some ceramics. I've been interested in guitars for probably my whole life because my dad plays. He's been trying to get me to play guitar for over 30 years. And I enjoy making them, the process of making, definitely more than I do practicing. So these are my process photos, sculpting and kind of merging these different types of wood together. The gourd guitar in the show is several, like at least three different gourds that I hacked up and glued together. And like I said, the wood is all from like either La Cañada or Pasadena. I've got olive and some acacia there, and hollowed everything out. So my horns, all these pieces, the cavities connect on the inside. And the necks I hand carved or sculpted. These are the wood species I use, the acacia at the top and the middle, and then this sycamore on the bottom neck. They all have very different, interesting patterns. So I do spend a lot of time just going through the wood and looking for certain angles or trying to find the prettiest ingrain I could bring in. The redwood is also locally sourced. I got redwood, acacia, olive, and gourd in my messy studio space where I finished them. So I have three in the show. The Gourd Instrument, the one in the middle here is actually English walnut from the Maloof Foundation, and it was filled with cavities from wormholes. I think Larry watched me cut some of that stuff up. And I filled that with a purple resin. And then the one on the right is sycamore from Pasadena. Yeah. And there we are. Okay. Those are my photos, Seth.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Joan. All right, so I will introduce our next up is Lauren Verdugo. And
Hello, thanks, Joan. That was great. I'm sitting right next to him, so I get to like look at the real thing while he's talking. So that was cool. All right, let me pull up the right thing here.
let me just, let me get to your bio, Lauren,
Oh,
while you're
yeah.
getting all set up.
People, I don't even know who I am. Yes, please do.
In case you forgot, Lauren started working with the Maloof through the Maloof Teens Education Program, and she became apprentice and assistant to Larry White, our final presenter. She had just recently earned her BA in Applied Design from San Diego State University, and with an emphasis in woodworking and furniture design, and currently is working as the workshop coordinator at the Maloof, and just finished a solo show at Bunny Gunner Gallery. So you just missed that. If you missed it, it was awesome. But thank you, Lauren. Take it away.
Thank you. Sweet. Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, present. Great. Let's see if this thing moves here. There we go. All right, cool. So how I decided to use the funding that we received, I wanted to try and do something for the community, try to figure out a way to have it not just contribute to a personal project. I wanted to see how we can just spread more awareness about the Maloof, but also kind of try to figure out ways we can get new woodworkers involved, especially ones that aren't usually represented in the greater field. So I decided to do a women's workshop, and it was technically my first workshop where I was leading, and I figured, I'm like, well, might as well, you know, offer it for free through the grant, just in case anything crazy happened, right? So they wouldn't get all mad at me because they spent money on it. So that was essentially why I wanted to use the grant funds for it. But basically it was to pilot that women's workshop program. So let's go ahead and get in there. This is inspired by Sam's El Salvador stool. And in the 60s, Sam was commissioned by the State Department to go to El Salvador and teach some folks down there how to make some exports, some products to sell. And so Sam taught these people how to turn things on the lathe, except it was a pedal lathe. So you had to be like constantly stomping on it. So it was a really simple design. And I always like to show on this picture here. Oh, I think I can do a pointer. Oh, snap. Let me see. Okay, I'll try to figure that out later. Okay, so anyway, how this one leg in front here on the left is kind of sticking up because it's really hard to get everything exactly the same when you've got a pedal lathe. So anyway, I wanted to also use the way Sam was fastening the top to the top of the legs, where he's just using a little spline. And so over here, this is the 7th revision. If you've designed furniture or designed anything, you'll know that the first one's never the one you think is the best. So I went through a few different changes. I put different angles on these pieces here so it would have more stability. And I don't know if anyone knows this, but typically for 3-legged things, they self-balance. So you don't have to worry about it kind of, you know, racking back and forth, but, you know, the top is only 12 inches in diameter. So when you sit on it, you know, if you sit on it too fast, you'll fly off. So had to make sure it was stable enough on there. So this is the first prototype. You can see these legs are really straight up and down. And that's what I didn't like. So that was one thing I fixed from the prototype until I got to where I was stoked about the stability of it. So once I got it to where I wanted it, I was able to go ahead and make some templates that I could replicate. And some of the things that I factored in were, you know, how much I wanted the chamfer, which is like a 45-degree cut along the edge treatment underneath on the top of the stool. And then where it would hit, you know, the top of the leg on the inside. So all these different things you have to plan out. And there was math involved here, which is, you know, you got to make sure it's repeatable and everything. So there's that. These are the parts after I was able to go ahead and apply those templates onto some real walnut. And so these are the pieces before you glue them up and before you, or I think I already have the cuts. You have to make little cuts on these dowels here so you can put the spline in on top. So there's that. This is that chamfer router bit right there underneath the tape and the legs. So there's that. Pretty sure you guys notice a lot of squirrels everywhere. That's kind of like what I put on the bottom of my furniture. So you'll continue to see more squirrels. If you have questions about it, we can talk about it later. But anyway, this is me taking off the edges on the bottoms of the legs so they don't chip off. And then this is me oiling it. Okay, so here we go. This is like actual happening in real life. So this was, I believe this is the second day this picture was taken, but we had 4 awesome women that came from the community. We had a, not a raffle, but a drawing. So we had over 300 something women in our area try to get into this class. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like a huge confirmation that there's people out there that do want something like this. So I thought that was awesome. So let's keep moving along. On the left here, this is Janae. She's one of our Maloof teen alum, and she's totally awesome and helps with some of our education programming. But this is them using Sam's Big Green Bean bandsaw. And so that's pretty magical. You know, you get to work on the bandsaw that Sam used. And we use this bandsaw for all our workshops up here. So if you end up here, you get to get some magic sawdust on you from this. So this is them cutting the holes on the tops of the legs on the left. My face is blocked, but there's a squirrel there, so it fills it in. And then on the right, my good friend Michelle, who also, she just got her master's in furniture design and woodworking from San Diego State. She was kind enough to help me co-instruct this class, and she's totally awesome. Check her out, Michelle Natividad-Stein. Awesome. Anyway, so she was able to help me with gluing up and, you know, being the other person in the room so no one chops off their fingers while I'm not looking. So there's that. And this is the finished thing. This is, some of them didn't even want to put it down because they were so excited. So I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, look at all the different variants in the walnut though. Isn't that cool? That's why we love walnut. Unfortunately, it's getting too expensive, but anyway, this was a really fun experience and I learned a lot, not just about the project, you know, trial and error, but just finding out that there's, you know, some traction out there for other folks to join in on this woodworking experience. So I'll be teaching co-ed classes after January. We're just finishing out the year, but anyway, that was awesome. I'm really glad that, you know, this pilot program through the grant was able to now give us a new class to offer. So that was essentially what it was for. So yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you, Lauren. So our next presenter is a man who kind of doesn't need any introduction, maybe, but I'm going to do it anyway. So Larry White was Sam's first apprentice in the 1960s and returned to the Maloof wood shop in the 90s after having a robust career teaching at 2 California universities. He's taught at many workshops at Anderson Ranch. He's currently living in Pioneer Town and serving as artist in residence at the Maloof Foundation. So I'll hand it over to you, Larry.
There you go. Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
well, welcome everybody. I'm glad you decided to join in today and look at the work we've all accomplished this last year. The work that I selected to do was based on an idea I had around 2014, which was to recycle timbers from the Maloof move back in 2001. A number of buildings were dismantled, and I was able to save a lot of the large timbers and pieces that I wanted to recycle into sculpture, used in an artistic way. And so I began a series of these large pieces. So when I received the grant, at the same time I was invited to make a piece or install a piece at Anderson Ranch Art Center in Snowmass Village, Colorado. So these two concepts kind of converged. And so what I'm going to show you is the process I kind of go through in building a piece of sculpture. This one's called oblique abrupt. These are abstract forms. I work in a very organic way. I do tons of sketches and I never make any of them. Once I start to work on a piece, it takes on a life of its own. And so I wanted to show you this model, which is in the exhibition at the Maloof right now. This was an idea I had that kind of boiled around for months. I finally decided to make a 1/4" scale model of it. And after I got it done, I kept looking at it and kept observing it, and I grew less fond of it the more I looked at it, and decided that I needed to change it and do something else. And this is the way I usually work. And but there were elements of it that I wanted to keep, and I like the overlapping steel plates. And so I took some of those elements and kept the forms, and then I morphed other parts of it into different shapes. And eventually I made scale models of those shapes you see in 1/8" plywood here on the left. And then for the exhibition, I created it again full scale out of Baltic birch plywood, and I used a faux finish on it to indicate the color of the final piece. And at the same time, I began the process of making a sculpture. I had to decide how I was going to build a portable base for it that would keep it from toppling over. And it had to be built in parts that I could assemble at Anderson Ranch. And I wouldn't have to dig a footing or pour cement there. I could carry it in and set the whole thing up. So these are a couple of the sketches I was playing around with in terms of solving that problem. Once I made the plywood scale model pieces of the plates I was going to use, I literally just traced them onto paper, and then I established axes on each one that would indicate the hole pattern that had to be drilled so that they would line up in the configuration that I wanted. So then I had the problem of translating that into digital, because I was going to have them cut at a company in Ontario with a water jet system. I wanted very clean, crisp lines on these plates. So I contacted my friend, Tom Bostic, who took the drawings. I emailed them to him. He put them in SketchUp and translated them into digital language. Then he emailed them to the company, and then the company translated that into their system for operating the CNC machines. And so that's how these plates were fabricated. In the meantime, I began construction on the base of the sculpture. And the welding was done with a Millimatic wire feed welder using argon. And this is just an example of the kind of found objects I was using along with fresh raw steel. plate. And I love using the found objects and creating a form as I go. I'm playing with elements where when the piece is done, I want the wind to be able to move it. I want it to flex. So I have to balance out the weight against the systems that I use to support it. But I'm using found objects that are compatible to the aesthetic language that I've started. And so it's a juxtaposition and give and take all the way through, finding the right parts and putting them together in an aesthetically pleasing manner. These show the process of cutting out steel elements. On the right, where I was making attachment plates for the beams, and those had to be cut out with a power hacksaw. And what happened was originally the beam part of the sculpture was to be a 8-foot long piece of apatong that came from the Maloof salvage. This is a very dense, heavy wood from Southeast Asia that's impervious to the destruction by elements and critters and that kind of thing. It's very durable. And so I decided to use it, but when I bolted it into the system, it was obvious it was too heavy for the spring structure that I built. So at that point, I changed focus and decided to cut it and use sections of it and suspend the two apart with steel tube and steel rod. And so on the right, you'll see I used a 2x4 to kind of put in place where the beam was going to go to calculate out the distance or how long I wanted the piece to be. On the right, I'm fabricating the support system between the two apatong sections. And all of this is done just in the moment as the ideas come, as I adjust to solve problems. Another thing that happened during this period was the wind never stopped out where I lived in the high desert. Usually in March 1st, or at the end of March, I mean, the wind stops, and it's a beautiful time of the year from March till mid-June, and that's usually when I work outside on these sculptures. The wind never stopped this year, so I couldn't weld, and so I had to move all of my woodworking equipment to the walls and move inside the metal building and do all the fabrication in there. So this gives you an idea of the space I was working in. Go ahead. Here's some of the elements that I was juxtaposing. You'll see that I chose the steel ring on top of the channel as a visual element relating to the other circular patterns in the piece. And you can see some of the other thing on the left side, you'll see that plate is, I'm able to bolt it together. The other thing about this piece is it had to be, I had to be able to dismantle it and then reassemble it on site up in Colorado. So everything was fabricated so it would come apart. And so here I'm in the final stages of adjustment and checking things out. I'm evaluating how things are looking 360 and deciding if I need to change anything. And at this point, I'm starting to strategize about the finish. I've never really used finish before on steel sculpture, but I decided because this was going to be on exhibition for a year in Aspen that I wanted to put a more durable finish on it. And I discovered basically a catalytic polyurethane that I used on it ultimately, and it seemed to work very well. It was very expensive, I found out, but it seemed to work really fine. The slide on the left kind of gives you a sense of the way the plates are separated from one another and create that dimension and shadow and line that I'm always looking for. The ring gear plates down at the bottom on that left side where the teeth are, you'll see how they relate to the teeth on the vertical element that goes up and down. And that's the kind of piece I look for when I'm deciding support systems to give it texture and visual interest. And these are some of the detail shots of how different elements relate to one another and create a visual language that makes it more appealing. And this is the final installation in Anderson Ranch Art Center. And you can see the concrete base that I fabricated with the round circles setting on the slabs that were slightly polished out and cleaned up. That gave me about a 650 pound, 700 pound base to anchor that without doing any footings and interrupting the ground or the drive. And so, so there it is, it's up there now. It was quite a long process. Because of the wind, I delayed the beginning of the piece for several months until I literally ran out of time. And that's when I had to move in the steel building to finish up and get it done and get it delivered on time for the sculpture show at Anderson Ranch Art Center. So anyway, there's my thoughts on the left there. These pieces represent organic growth of an idea juxtaposed to the static nature of engineering. It becomes harmonic. So when I get an idea, it's never a stable idea. The idea is changing all the time, but at the same time, I'm developing the engineering to produce the piece. So as the idea moves along and morphs, then I have to go back and redesign the engineering part of it. And so it's this strange dance of energy that I think I enjoy the most about the whole process. So anyway, that's what I've been up to.
All right, thank you, Larry. Okay, so before we get into the Q&A, which from the chat, the Q&A from the audience, questions from the audience, we're going to do something a little bit different. But if you do have more questions, audience members, feel free to type those into the chat at any time. So we have a couple in there, so keep those coming. So for those of you who have joined us for earlier talks, you'll know that we usually just have one presenter and they present and then we do a Q&A. I thought rather than just following that same format, we should take advantage of having 3 artists on the same presentation to get them. I've asked them to comment or ask questions of each other so that they can have some dialogue amongst themselves. So I've asked them to we'll do a little round robin of questions and comments between the artists. And artists, if you get mixed up, I'll try to keep track of where we are with just going in a circle. But we're going to start with Jom addressing Lauren, and then we'll kind of go through the order there. So go ahead, Jom.
All right. Lauren, I gotta say, I like tools in general, but also I've been watching Lauren's work on her Instagram as it evolves and grows. So I want to know about how your style, your design process has grown since you left Larry and Gun to make their way into any kind of workshop.
I didn't catch the tail end of that. Could you repeat just the last sentence? Sorry, I know it's like I got most of the question, but
the design style, how it's evolved, and if you have any new pieces that you want to bring into the workshop.
Oh, okay. So thank you for that question, because it's hard to like see what type of designer you are based on one design, right? So yeah, it's changed a lot since I left working for Larry as much as I was at the time, before I went back to San Diego. Well, not back, but back to school to go to SDSU. I kind of was focusing on taking in basic foundational skills and trying to push them as far as I could. So, miters and, any type of joint that has a dado, which is it's almost like, you're making a wood sandwich, just for folks who don't know what that is. It's, cutting it on the table saws with a fat blade. So dados and miters, and then just using the sculptural techniques that I learned from Larry, but trying to take it in a different direction. So I've also gotten into, I'm a huge fan of George Nakashima. So I like the bow ties on, things like that to, keep the cracks on things. And I do kind of keep to the whole standard that has been set, by working for this guy. But it's changed a lot in the sense that I think I'm now finally finding my voice in my work. So that's been good. That's been good. And in terms of bringing it into the workshop for the co-ed class after January, it'll be a side table, but it'll be built like one of the tables that I have made recently. So it's still like, you're using foundational skills, but you're kind of putting it together in a very, Maloof problem-solving way. So all that's to come. It's all still like, it has to be put together. But yeah, thank you for that question. So do I ask Jom a question now, Seth?
You're going to take it to Larry and go circular.
Oh, okay. So I ask Larry a question?
Yeah, or a comment.
Okay, let's see. Do you think that you're going to go more metal or more wood from where we are right now after this project?
After this project, I'm probably going to emphasize the beam part of it more. I get back into really utilizing the material that I salvaged. I love the metal part, of course. You can see that I'm really involved with that, but I think I would like to have more of the wood present in the piece. That particular one would have had more, except that wood was just too dense and heavy for the system I built, so I had to modify it.
I actually helped him take those pictures of him putting it together, and it was like right when I got my second vaccination, so I was like, so I was like totally not there when I was taking those photos, and I was helping him put it together, and we figured out that we needed to strengthen one part of it because it fell and bonked me on the head pretty hard, so we had to reinforce part of the sculpture. But anyway, so yeah.
So anyway.
So
So
Larry,
now-
you want to take it to Jom? Question or comment for Jom?
Well, I don't know if I have a question, but I'm just kind of blown out by these instruments you built, and especially the wormy one. That wood, when I saw that wood, I immediately thought firewood. And when I saw what you were doing with it, I was just totally blown and fascinated. And when I see it now, it's just awesome. It's just turned out beautifully. And so it was kind of a wake-up call to me about perception of material and how you can take something and really morph it into another realm. The other piece, the gourd tar, I love that piece, but I was really wondering, how are you going to get down with a Chuck Berry riff on that thing?
That's the next question, I guess. The next challenge. Yeah, someone else had asked about the wormholes. I put in the comment, I filled it with a purple pigment, amethyst pigment, and the Total Boat resin. And the gourd tar was interesting. I kind of didn't know what it was gonna be like as I was sculpting it. And I had to, after I finished it, I did have to like cut down some of the horns because they were in the way. But,
All right, Jom, you want to take it back to Larry then?
all right. Back to Larry. Larry, when I was in art center, I started in car design, and people used to say that there was like an automotive style to things I did, even if it wasn't a car. And I I assume you get that a lot, because there's definitely like an automotive feel with the car parts. I guess I'm wondering if where that particular part comes from. It carried through a lot of your style and your work.
It's partly the nature of where I live, because I live out in the high desert. And when you scrounge around for metal, usually what you're finding is car parts. And so I don't look at them as an object. I look at them as an aesthetic element. And so I try to pick out pieces that either have a really amazing color rust or color to them, or an interesting shape that I can use with other shapes, you know. And so it just kind of migrates that way because of the nature of where I find stuff. But I also like to go to Industrial Metal Supply and go shopping in their art box, because they have all the commercial industrial cutoffs and trivia that they throw in the box for artists to come in and buy really cheap. And so there's some amazing pieces that I find there too. But I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it's just driven by the nature of the area I'm in and what I can find when I'm out looking for stuff, you know. Like I love car springs because I can separate them and use them together in a different way that creates these kinetic elements when the wind blows and the piece move around and that kind of thing. And so, you know, I don't know what else to say about it.
All right, Larry, then you got a comment or question to Lauren?
Oh, man.
Well, comment is that I just can't believe how you progressed in the last couple of years and what you're doing. And I love this idea that you're moving forward with the workshops in many areas in terms of facilitating women's workshops and introducing people to good beginning projects, you know, that they can accomplish and have a great experience. I think it's incredible.
Well, thank you. And basically my response is it's all his fault, which is my usual response. But thank you. Yeah, I mean, like, hopefully I had to give him a good enough reason to like stop working for him for a while, right? Like, you know, I can't just be like, oh, I'm going to go off and like start, you know, selling, you know, making stuff out of turquoise, you know, and selling it on Etsy or something. So at least I used my time wisely, and I went back to school. We decided that, you know, I was like, well, I really want to teach, and you need your degree for that. So teaching is something that has come to be something that's important to not only like inform myself, but to kind of push not only my projects forward, but it really inspires me to see different perspectives and to see that when people just light up because they're like, oh my gosh, I just did that. I just made that, you know, and it's just a bunch of steps. You know, I think anyone can be a woodworker. It's not, you don't have to be like blessed by, you know, Sam Maloof's rocking chair or anything. You know, I think everyone should try it. But yeah, it's inspiring to work with Larry, because I mean, how can you not be inspired by even just like this one sculpture? You know, there's a lot, and you know, densely packed art experience. So I have to say, it is pretty hard. Your influence and Sam's influence, it's really hard to like have it still so close in time and me still be around it. So yeah, hopefully there's enough distance between my work and other things, but yeah, I'm just stoked that I got to learn. So thanks.
All right.
Oh yeah, can I ask Joan now?
Yeah, so you to Joan will be the last leg.
Sweet. All right, last leg of the journey. So yeah, I'm looking at these pictures here. I want to know, did you use, okay, so I kind of have like two questions. Did you use completely different processes for each one of these guitars? Because it kind of looks like you like intuitively sculpted it at the same time. And then on top of that, this follow-up question is, are you going to make more Gourd guitars like like acoustic guitars? Because I really like the hollow sound of those Gourds, but yeah, that's my question.
Okay, so first question was, well, I started them all at the same time. I know I had this goal, I wanted to do a series of instruments.
Yeah.
So I probably started just looking at the materials like that, the firewood walnut that Larry and I were looking at with the bugs crawling out of it, just kind of seeing if it had any potential, like how I could make this work. And then I guess I just kind of figured it out along the way. The first instrument I did that was very playable, good quality, it has a specific template shape that I used. So the other two instruments that are solid body, they're basically that template kind of sketched onto them, but not exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, they kind of went their different directions. It's just more of me figuring out what will make them work as I go and get what I get.
Yeah.
And then what was the second question?
It was about, are you going to make more like hollow body Gourd guitars? Because I'm pretty interested.
My dilemma is I build a ton of furniture and then I have a sponsor where we're selling reclaimed wood and guitars don't use up a lot of wood. So
yeah,
there's definitely more of a push to get some more furniture finished and out. But I do plan on making more instruments for sure. All the Gourd instruments are acoustic electric.
Okay.
So if I make a Gourd instrument, it will be acoustic, but I like to slap at least one pickup on everything just in case I need it.
Yeah, that's rad.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take it to the chat questions, and my screen is acting a little funny, so I can't read this verbatim at the moment, but Tom was asking you, Lauren, about the importance of doing a women's workshop.
So I guess the main thing is that, you know, how there's always that one kid in class, in every class, and this has nothing to do with gender, but you know, that one kid in class that's always like, ooh, I know. And you're like, okay, cool it, you know, like give everyone else a chance to like answer the question. That's kind of the gist as to why you need a women's workshop, because sometimes people just in general who are new to a field that they haven't necessarily been encouraged to grow up around, like drills or hand tools or things like that. It kind of offers the opportunity to ask any question. There in any class, there's no dumb questions, but sometimes it's hard when there's other people in class that they may or may not feel like is like judging them because they don't know, or they know that they're complete beginners. So kind of having an introductory class where they, you know, feel like they could, they're all starting on the same level, you know, beginners, and being able to ask those questions that may seem basic to other woodworkers who are at a different caliber, who might just want to jump in and mansplain, right? Like that's really the main thing. But yeah, just offering like a safe environment for people to ask any question that they want. Yeah.
Excellent. And so I'm wondering if you can, I'll kind of take this to each of you, talk a little bit more about source materials, and that could be physical materials, I think, as well as kind of conceptual materials or ideas, and kind of the origins there. So Joe, can you talk about sourcing this these pieces of wood? How do you go about that? What are you looking for? And how does that process start before you even start making cuts?
Well, I do think a lot about sustainability and environmental impact. The reason I use wood is more because of it's a great structural material for utility. So I guess I start off picking my materials based off of what they look like first. If I know structurally they can hold up to whatever I need them to do, then I'm looking at colors, patterns, textures, and wood grows everywhere, so I try to reuse or recycle whatever I can. And my experience, like whatever wood I find, once it's finished to a certain quality, it looks beautiful. Like looks way more amazing than anyone would expect. That's kind of what I've gathered from all the workshops with Larry and other instructors at the Maloof. Like no matter what, it will be beautiful, and then I can focus more on the sculptural part of it. But then as far as sustainability goes, I do like that I have access to locally sourced, ethically sourced material. And I try to keep that in mind when I make anything. It's like, what's going to happen to it? How is it going to be disposed of? Is it toxic? Is it harmful? And so on.
Okay, and Larry, so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the beam. So you can elaborate on this, but for those who might not know that Sam and Alfreda's home and Sam's workshops were moved when the 210 freeway was coming through. And so not all of the buildings were moved, and that's where the beam came from. I believe if I have that correct. And so if you could talk about, saving those beams, how you got to that point, what was the meaning of not letting those beams disappear?
Well, the actual idea came out of the period where I was helping Sam actually build the model for his new house when we were anticipating the move. And in the process of landscaping it, because Sam always had art outside, to enhance the model, I landscaped it, and then I built a small scale beam sculpture that was in the landscape environment of the model. And so after we moved, the move occurred in 2001. That's when we finally finished the move. It took 2 years. They had decided that 2 of the buildings at the old site, it would be better to dismantle them rather than move them, because they were trading the moving part for construction assets on the new site. And so Sam, of course, was very possessive about his environment, and so he moved all that material to the new site, and it sat around there for a number of years. And then at one point after Sam left us, a decision was made to get rid of all of that material. And I immediately thought of the little model of the beam sculpture that I'd done for the house model. And I decided I'm going to salvage those timbers, save them, and then recycle them as art. And that's where the basic idea came from. And most of these were Doug fir rafters and joists and big beams, heavy timbers, some of them like 4 by 12s, 24 feet long, that kind of thing. And so I rented a big truck and I drove them out to the desert because they were going to just get rid of them. And so that's where the idea came from. Since I started working on this project, I've made, I think this last one was the 8th piece in the series that I've done using the beams. I just wanted to give it new life. I could say one thing more about that could be interesting to some people. Back in the late 80s, I bought a sculpture of Garuda, the Indonesian god, and who is an overseer and watches over things. And this was an older piece that wasn't polychromed. It was a beautiful carved piece that was weathered. And I had it in my studio for years, just to look over my studio and take care of it. And cut to the chase, when I was in College Business Park in Upland, someone broke into our studio one evening while we were at an opening, and I didn't discover it until 3 weeks later. I walked by and looked up to say hello to Garuda, and it was gone. Someone broke into my studio and took it. That's the only thing they took. So they had obviously seen it in there. So I was really angry for a long period of time. And then all of a sudden I had this realization that the Garuda had a life of its own. And it had traveled to many places. It was originally carved somewhere and probably traveled and lived in different places. Then it wound up in Capitola, California, where I bought it from an import shop. Then it lived with me, and then it moved on to somewhere else. So once I understood that it had a life and was moving through time just the same way I was, I released all the anger that I had about it. And so I kind of feel the same way about some of these timbers, is that they were blessed by Sam and his aesthetic and design. And so what I'm trying to do is just give them a new life for a while. You know, I don't know how long that's going to be in the desert, but at least it's interesting to me, and it stimulates me, and so that's why I do it.
Awesome, thank you. Well, nothing lasts forever, right? So Lauren, way I'm thinking about source material for your project, I'm thinking about how you started, you know, giving tours of the home and probably talking about this stool that Sam made, the El Salvador stool, and then you've transitioned into engaging creatively with that story. I'm just wondering about what was the meaningfulness of that story that made you want to engage with it, and then just kind of your thought process of carrying through with that.
I think what's really interesting is that was one of those first really big teaching opportunities for Sam, where he was having to streamline a design in a very short amount of time in order to deliver it and be able to teach it to people. And that was the main reason, because that's the intent of what I wanted to do with the grant. So that specific process I wanted to go through myself with an inspired design. So, you know, going through that process, it was a challenge. You know, it's completely different than designing in the moment, which is what I've been taught, you know, through Sam to Larry and Larry to me. And so it's been really interesting translating that, but especially trying to streamline a design to make repeatable and not have the ratio be like 50-50 success rate, right? You need to eliminate all those hiccups in the road. But on top of that, you know, Sam going to a different place where these people have gone through a really terrible time. Like that was right after a war, and, you know, what did they have left? And it was a way for Sam to give these folks an opportunity to interact with craft. And I think that craft in general is just a healing process. And, you know, not to get all spiritual on you, but like George Nakashima said, you know, this is trees and interacting with trees is like our most intimate connection with nature, you know? So having people who generally may or may not just be on the computer all day, you know, things like that, you never think about, like, go and high five a tree, right? But like if you sit in a piece of handmade furniture that's made out of wood, you're kind of like, oh my gosh, this used to be a tree, you know? So it's kind of like transforming the way we interact with nature. But anyway, to answer your question, that was why I connected with that stool. And its little leg is up in the air. I thought it was like dancing. So that was just another side note. So.
Great. So my screen is back. I'm able to read the chat again. I'm gonna try and squeeze in another question or maybe two here. To Joan from Stephen, have you found that the shape of the gourds affect the sound of the finished instrument? And if so, have you done enough of them to be able to predict what the final sound might be like?
Short answer, yes, it does affect the sound. And no, I have not made nearly enough to figure out how to have control over that. As far as sound tonal qualities go from my research, whatever you use to make that resonator box, it just needs to be firm so that the sound bounces off of it. And then on an acoustic instrument, you're getting that sound is the top vibrating back and forth. But in general, if you have an electric guitar with regular pickups, even if it's electric, the sound is coming from the whole instrument vibrating. So the material choice does matter. They typically use a softer wood for bodies and a denser wood for the neck for structure. But the second instrument I ever made was a Gourd guitar with a Purple Heart neck. And the Purple Heart sounds like what you would imagine glass sounds like if you try to strum it. It's just like this really twangy, like nothing resonates. It was bad. Materials matter. I focus on the wood, type of wood I use with the gourd, and then to treat the gourd, I just hollow it out. It's already hollow, but I just try to remove the soft stuff. And I've coated it with something that'll give it a harder, more rigid surface. And that's as much as I've practiced with my research on getting control over that sound.
Excellent. Well, we're just past 5 o'clock now, so I think we'll wrap it up. As you may have noticed, we've been recording this, and I'm going to send out the recording to everyone once we get it posted to our YouTube channel. And come see the exhibition in person. You got to see these pieces in person to get the full experience. And sign up for a workshop. Lauren's got a workshop coming up to make one of these awesome stools starting on the 11th. So we have just a couple spots left. Get one before they sell out. All right. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Seth.
All right. Thanks everybody else for joining us.
Thank
Have
you.
a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.